Okay, well, hello, friends. Welcome to Black and Bright session on the legacy of William Cooper. We've got a yarn bomber that will start us off, and the yarn bomber is a lovely person called Coral Reeve. She's a Gunditjmara woman living in Geelong. She is currently completing her Masters of Arts in Writing and Literature. After 10 years of studying writing and publishing work, she aims to run an editing and publishing business. And she has a poem for us now in which she will yarn bomb us all to oblivion. Please, Coral, come up. Coral Reeve.
Thank you. This light's a bit bright. All right, the title of my poem is called Love and a Castle on a Hill. Period. Stop. It didn't make it. Period. Stop. The sperm raced to the egg, and now there sits a zygote. My lesson here, ladies and gents, and other defines, the egg never chased a man. Nothing too cliche, he hadn't begun to hit me yet, for the voice was loud enough to knock holes in the walls. That's why I avoided my family's calls. Facebook shouted, "Another them!" You retorted, "As long as he isn't black." Clearly, you do not understand biology, let alone monogamy. Flashback to the moment I sat in court. You had all your family around you, your enabling cohort. Oblivious was an understatement. Stupid love toxins flowing through my veins. I am grateful Mother Nature gave me looks, books, and well, ignorance remains. The blastocyst has come and gone, and embryo starts to do its thing. I could go another Kiev, but my heartburn disagrees. Furthering my studies, I was completing my bachelor degree. Working for money, I was working for DHHS in the children category. You called me a bitch. I refused a kiss. You threatened to kill me, rip him out, and dispose of me like a useless Tupperware container. I left to find a castle on a hill. The fetus was now active and wanted daily fruit salad. Today, he still wants fruit salad. Back then, I clothed him out of a suitcase. Years ago, we lived in a castle on a hill. 2 pet dragons, food, and now. Period. Stop. Period. Stop. Period. Stop. Another thought of having him again is the possibility of meeting you, reliving what was once then. We once lived in a castle on a hill, 2 pet dragons, food, and now I dress him from glass robes.
Thank you, Coral. Okay, now some of the more observant of you might have noticed that Kimberly isn't with us. She was advertised to be part of this session, but unfortunately she's been struck down by the Rona. She is fine, she's got mild symptoms, and she apologises for not being able to make it today, but we should be thanking her for keeping us safe. So we have a more than capable replacement for Kimberly. And what I thought I might do is, instead of introducing our friends this morning, I might get them to introduce themselves, explain who William Cooper is to them, and then we'll have a yarn. You want to start off, Leonie?
Yep, okay. Can you hear me? Yep. I'm Leonie Drummond, and I'm one of the William Cooper's grandchildren, great-grandchildren. My father is Uncle Boydie Turner, and I was born in Mooroopna, where great-grandfather passed away. And not long after I was born, the hospital closed and moved to Shepparton. So I feel very proud and honoured to be able to speak on behalf of my great-grandfather. He was pretty incredible, and it's really nice to be sitting with Sonia and with Daniel, because we're all connected and we all fall from that line of, and Kitty is our a special woman and a special place in our heart. So yeah, really good to be, and thanks for coming today to listen to this incredible story.
Well, yeah, I'm Sonia Cooper. We do all acknowledge the Wurundjeri people as well. So I come down from the Robert Cooper line, and Leonie's William, and obviously Daniel's Ada, but he'll explain that. I guess I've grown up on Cumragunja my whole life, I guess. You know, walking the same soil as Uncle William and all the great people and all our people who were there today, because they you know, they're there today because of the fight. So, yeah.
So, yes, my name is Daniel James. I fall from the Ada Cooper line, who was Uncle William's sister. She married a fellow called Thomas James, and hence I've got the name James. But that's all to say that the three of us are all children of Kitty Lewis, then Cooper. I can only imagine the life that she would have had. She would have been a child at the point of first contact up at what is now known as Echuca. Her clan was situated between the Goulburn River, Kyoila, and the Capaspy River, which basically was where Echuca is now, being the southernmost stretch of Dungala, the Murray River. It would have been a time of absolute tumult, and that was when William was born into the middle of that, either at the junction of the Goulburn and Murray Rivers or a Moira station. There's a little bit of, with all these things, the fog of time and the fact that we didn't get to write our own stories until people like Uncle William started writing our own stories and recommending action and cooperation with the invaders, that we started to find out through the midst of time what the story really was. So, by way of introduction, I'll just read this. The story and life of Yorta Yorta Man and founder of the Australian Aborigines League, William Cooper, has been gradually entering the conscious of mainstream Australia over recent years. There are now law buildings named after him. The former federal seat of Batman was changed to Cooper in his honour. Monash University has a William Cooper Institute. And while Cooper's name is becoming more familiar to people, much of his story remains unknown outside of the Aboriginal community, where Cooper and his contemporaries are very, very much lauded as the brave innovators that they were and are. So we're hoping today to put a bit more meat on the bone for you. We might be filling some gaps for ourselves. We've all quite steeped in the story of William and our people, so we're going to have a very sort of free-flowing conversation about it. Or I think I'll start with you, Leonie. Very broad question, let's start there. What does Uncle William mean to you?
Well, you know, I guess I'm pretty proud of him actually, and the work that he's done, and along the way I've discovered more and more about that type of work that he did do, and it's pretty incredible, and his what he has actually done and how resilient he was to stick at the cause. Most of his political stuff that he was writing around that time and going to the Yarra and standing on soapboxes and sprouting about equal rights for his people was unbelievable that he didn't give up, because we all find ourselves sometimes in situations where it just gets too much. And my dad, who's 93, he is his grandson, and he actually took him in and a number of other grandchildren during that time when he did move off the mission. You know, and moving off the mission because of the way that he was treated, and also the fact that he didn't really, you couldn't receive a pension if you were an Aboriginal person living on a mission, because how the government looked at it was that you were being looked after by the government, so you weren't entitled to it. So he moved down in the later part of his life, and you know, he certainly did a load of work that is filters through to all of us here, to, you know, Aboriginal people today with the fight.
His activism and his writing in particular in the later part of his life towards the end was the energy that he must have had to, and the passion to do something for the plight of his people must have been so strong within him, and he used the skills that he developed over many years to do some of his strongest advocacy work towards the end of his life. Sonia, what does Uncle William mean to you?
Oh, well, I guess for me, I get to revel in the the greatness, they paved the way for me to do what I do now. I work for my traditional owner group. I live out in the bush on country. I see Uncle William's grave a lot because we do bury our people up in the cemetery a fair bit. But yeah, to me it means that, I look to the past to do what I do now and what I do for the future. So, they were I was saying to Leonie, they were the movers and shakers of our times. So for me, growing up on Camera and still being on Camera now, and I get to see, just some amazing things that have come as a result of the fight Uncle William did, with the day of mourning, and then obviously you've got other things that Uncle William did too. So, and I'm sure Daniel's going to cover that, but yeah.
I've only just found out about him this morning. No, one of the first recorded piece of activism that we have available to us was the 1887 petition to the Governor of New South Wales, Lord Carrington, as he was known, asking for what Uncle William described as a small parcel of their own land. But one of the things about that letter that was co-signed by 10 inhabitants of Maloga, which is Yorta Yorta for Sandhills, and we can talk about Maloga a little bit more later on. For the first time, an Aboriginal person put in writing that they wanted a small parcel of their land back, and the term that resonates most with me in that, which goes, it's our divine right. Now, if this wasn't someone that was, asking for something from a position of weakness, he knew exactly what had happened to his people because he had lived it. What do you think about? Where do you think his activism generated from? I mean, I will put my hand up with and say that Thomas James would have had a significant role in helping to shape all of the activism around Maloga, but that burning desire didn't leave him. It kept with him all the way through. What are some of your thoughts on that, Leonie?
Well, I think, the simple fact that, you don't treat people like that is a big thing, and that showed who he was as a man. So I also think that he went to live with the O'Shanasseys in Melbourne.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that played a big part in, even though he was young, it sort of shapes you as a young person to see the work that he was doing politically. But also living, it would have been amazing coming off a mission as an Aboriginal boy and moving in with the O'Shanasseys in Camberwell in a big fancy house. And I can only imagine what that felt like. It could have been intimidating, but I think that he would have seen a lot.
Yeah. My sense from him is that he wasn't intimidated by much at all. I think a lot of that has to do with the stature of the man. He was over 6 foot, so back then 6 foot was very, very tall, broad as a Mallee bull. Do you think, Sonia, that those early days in Camberwell made him sort of see how the other half lived and come back to the mission at Maloga and try and advocate for a slice of that type of lifestyle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can talk from experience from what I do now, and one of my jobs is to facilitate. So I've got to talk to the mob, and then I've got to talk to government, and I deal with federal and state governments, on a daily basis. So for me, it's understanding, the dynamics of what's happening around me in order to progress our rights. But, when you learn these tools, there's tools that you learn along the way. You learn how to, look, I'm not saying you manipulate people, but you can manipulate the law, and I shouldn't say that. But anyways, the idea is that you understand what legislation is, you understand what policy is, you understand the behaviour of government, and you understand, what's really going on. So there's no longer a blanket there. You take that blanket off and you can truly see what's going on. And I think Uncle William did that, I can just say from my experience that, I look to Uncle William and Uncle Jack Patton, Bill Ferguson as well to do what I do now.
Yep.
So the way that I've done that is draw from their experiences and look to what I do now. I reckon definitely.
I think he made a a firm decision early on in his activism that he was going to use the white fellas' tools against them, try and use the levers that they have developed for themselves in their society and use those as an opportunity to try and get some justice for his mob. And so therefore the petition writing and the letter writing became sort of a core element of his activism. One of the more fascinating things that I find with Uncle William's story is his relationship with the two missions that he lived on. His relationship with Maloga and the mission manager at Maloga, Daniel Matthews, and his relationship at Kamargunja when we were actually given what we were asking for in terms of a home of our own and land of which to work. But his relationship with Daniel Matthews is something that really fascinated me. They actually ended up leaving Maloga, establishing Kamargunja, and from what I understand, there was a degree of bad blood between some of our mob and the Matthews. But having said that, he named one of his children after Daniel Matthews, Daniel Cooper, who we'll talk about a little bit later on. What do you see as his sort of relationship with the missions? Because Uncle Jack Patton wrote a letter saying that missions were the worst thing that happened to our mob. And then there is counter correspondence from Uncle William saying, actually, without the missions, we would not be here. They were one of the best things that happened to us. So that relationship is really, really, really fascinating. Do you have any reflections on that?
Yeah, I think he had a lot of respect for Daniel Matthews and Janet Matthews. I think that he owed a lot to them. He learned a lot from them, and he took that through his life, and it helped build building blocks to be able to use that later on in his life. I don't know whether the relationship with Kamargunja, the mission McGuigan, was, something that was a positive thing. I think he was a nasty, mean, controlling, and a lot of those letters that he wrote highlighted that sort of thing. And I know that, when one of his wives died and one of his younger infant children, he asked for a carriage to be taken, and that was denied. So I guess, his relationships that he had, he wanted to keep strong.
Yeah, I think he placed a lot of blame on the mission manager at Kamargunja for the loss of Annie, his first wife, who passed away from typhoid. Partially, it's speculated because of some of the sanitation that was either there or not there at Kamargunja. I mean, Sonia, you grew up on Kamara. You know Maloga's, downstream. You walk it, you feel it every day.
Yeah.
What do you think his relationships were with some of the mission managers, and what is it like to walk that same ground that all those wonderful leaders and survivors and thrivers walked? What's it like trotting that every day?
Oh, look, it's awesome to know what's happened. I mean, I guess growing up on Kamara when we were teenagers, we still didn't understand the gravity of what a mission, like what the mission was. We didn't know what the definition of a mission was. To us, the mission was home, you know what I mean? And Kamargunja in our language means home. So we didn't really understand that. And then when we start to learn about Uncle William and Uncle Jack Patton and Auntie Marge Tucker and all the other, movers and shakers, then we start to say, well, what does this really mean? So for us, we didn't understand, while our feet are on the ground, we didn't understand they're there because of these people. So to know that now, because I'm getting old, is pretty awesome to know that I'm in the same area, same place where all of this activism took place. And, so the times back then were different to the times now. There's still these underlying issues because, land councils operate the mission and other missions in New South Wales, and there's a lot of political problems happening there that if you're not familiar with that, we have to deal with that on a daily basis sort of thing. yeah, just to know that, and I think because we visit the grave a fair bit, you know, like the cemetery, you know, it's a great reminder for us, you know, and that he's still there, like he's buried there, so it's a very sacred place for us. But
That cemetery at Kamargunja is basically a who's who of what I would suggest, or not only activists for our people, but in many ways they gave birth to the social justice movement in Australia, which is different from the union movement. This was a movement to actually get some divine right to their own land and to better conditions and to be recognised as citizens of Australia. Let's just go back again to Kitty Cooper, who was the first to convert to Christianity, and William was the last to convert to Christianity. They both lived on Maloga at the same time. But Leonie, do you just want to sort of ruminate about the strength of what must have been an amazing woman to do and survive like she did?
Oh, you know, it's incredible. I really can't imagine what life must have been like for her during that invasion time, the types of things that would have been happening and what she would have seen during that time, and the protection of her children. I guess that's really needs to be highlighted about what she provided for them. And, you know, it's around being a good mum and protection and all of those things. So I guess they're the things that I see as a family, and you know, it's just incredible what she's gone through to survive, to bring children up that have been able to do what they've been able to do. So
I mean, so you must see that sort of resilience in a lot of the mob that you hang around with as well.
Well, you know, like obviously, like I was raised by my nan. I was part of the welfare system right up until I was 16. So having welfare come out and check you and, you know, and see if your nan's looking after you properly was a little bit disrespectful. But, you know, I never got taken. I was lucky I never got taken. But, you know, Leonie's father did talk about, you know, when the big tall black cars would come rolling into Cumra and it's time to start running, you know what I mean? That taking of the children hasn't stopped at Cumra and everywhere else that I see. So that continues today. So that's still a massive fight to keep the children.
And so those trauma lines from the point of first contact still resonate just as strongly today as in many ways they ever have. I always look at sort of the colonialism in sort of like 3 or 4 waves. So you've got the point of first contact, then you have the denial of land. Then you have the massacres, the murders. Alongside that, then you have smallpox, which did decimated Aboriginal populations everywhere. Then you have the grog, and then you have the clerks. And the clerks and the bureaucracy are still very much with us, more now than probably ever before. One thing that
Population's got bigger.
Yeah, it's actually gotten
So
bigger.
they're actually multiplied.
Yeah, multi-stories.
Yeah.
I sense that it was the bureaucracy that in many ways frustrated Uncle William the most. Do you have any reflections on that? I'll throw it open to either of you.
well, it was frustrating for him, I imagine, and because of the ignorance to him, and the disrespect around his letters and his protests, and not being able to be heard. I guess he felt like he hadn't been heard, or he wasn't going to be heard, and his demands were so nicely put forward. I think if you read any of his letters, he was quite forceful in some ways, but not a rant. And
Never answered.
no, they were so beautifully written. If you ever get a chance to read some of his letters, you'll know what I mean. So...
Well, I haven't, if it's okay, Sonia, do you want to add something?
I just want to say Uncle William is, very distinguished And Quiggin and everybody else is despicable and disgusting. You know, this man had to operate, Uncle had to operate in a world in which he had to keep his socks clean and, you know, keep everything nice and tidy. And you had to operate in order to, you know, like, because the exemptions were then, you know, back then as well. And I think there's not enough credit given to the psychological mind about how they'd have to prepare themselves just to operate in a world like that and then work triple time.
I always thought that if he was born into privilege as a white man, he was the equal, in my opinion, in terms of intellect as someone like Robert Menzies. He certainly had far greater moral clarity than someone like Robert Menzies or some of the other Australian Prime Ministers did. So I think a lot of the frustration was born out. So listen, we're putting this to you really well. The justice here is can be very simply delivered to us, but again and again and time again, those calls were just not met. And so he would turn to writing in The Age, he would turn to writing in The Argus, which was clearly his favourite paper because there's so many letters to The Argus. It's not funny. But just to pick up on what you said, Leonie, in terms of some of his writing, I happen to have some of his writing here, and it's actually the Maloga petition, which was asking for the first time for a parcel of our own land, and it was co-signed by 10 people. But I'll just read a bit to you. To His Excellency, the Right Honourable Baron Carrington, Your Excellency, the following of the Aborigines and half-castes on the Maloga Aboriginal Mission Station and the neighbourhood thereof hereby showeth that while grateful for the benefits conferred upon them by a liberality of our government in aiding the Aborigines Protections Association to provide a home for them and their families, and also recognising their debt of gratitude to the association, they will suggest that on recommendation of that society, those among us who so desire should be granted sections of land not less than 100 acres per family in fee simple or a small nominal rental annually, with the option for purchase at such prices as deemed reasonable into the future. And then he goes on to say, we think that such a provision would far more be in accord with the wishes of Her Most Gracious Majesty the Queen Victoria in the Jubilee year of her reign, many of the methods adopted to celebrate that occasion, and also be fitting in memorial connection with the celebration of the centenary of the colony. So he's actually, they and him are actually saying, listen, you know, it's a big year for the Queen. It's a big thing for you know, the colony as a whole. Wouldn't it be a really nice thing to just, you know, give us a little bit of parcel of land, because it's the right thing to do, and it's a good way of celebrating, you know, Her Majesty. So there you're seeing the political nous sort of come in straight away, and that nous seemed to me to grow over time. What say you?
Well, at Camera now, the same fight is occurring. And because the Land Councils run the show and the Aboriginal Land Rights Act runs the show, and there's still invested land in her Queen, which is built into the Aboriginal Land Rights Act, the blackfellas, so Camera is still fighting against our own mob to get the land back, but they're managing it on behalf of the founding colony, which is New South Wales. I mean, Gleeson said in one of his Boyer lectures in 2000, you know, when Federation occurred in 1901, the colonies were never, in any strict legal sense of the form, meant to have sovereignty, and neither did the states. So at which point did this occur? So that actually plays out in the state of New South Wales. And there's actually different constitutional rules, you know, I believe, that are occurring, you know, because they have their own federal constitutional lawyer looking after land councils. And land council boundaries do not reflect traditional owner boundaries. So that's a problem anyways. So, you know, you can't even, you know, not everyone can be a member of the land councils, and not everyone can live on Cummeragunja. You know, so the political fight now is one of it's a little bit different, because sometimes, you know, I'm not saying blackfellas don't do the right thing, but it's not actually occurring the way that the vision was back when Uncle William and everybody was there. You know, it was meant to be a fight. Now, at the moment, there's segregation amongst the mob.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a form of, well, not a form, but there is lateral violence
And internal racism.
that now occurs as
Yeah.
a result. Where I think one of the few benefits that William Cooper and his contemporaries had was they were united. You know, they were united in a common cause, and they knew that if they stuck together, they could take on anything. But
And
now,
sorry to interrupt, but Daniel, that doesn't happen today.
no.
You know what I mean? And so now you're fighting against your own mob. And I think they'd be horrified to think this is what they paved the way for. That's another side of the story, folks. So.
Yeah, it's a very sad thing to see, indeed. He lost his first wife, Annie, and then he remarried Agnes at Nathalia. And unfortunately, she passed away, and he was left with, I think it was 5 children. One of them being Daniel Cooper, who was the eldest boy, who went to fight in the First World War. Leonie, do you have any sort of reflections on whether Uncle William would have been in favour of Daniel's service, or whether he would have been resistant to the idea of going away and fighting in a war, or would he have been proud of his boy for, you know, donning in a uniform and serving his country? Do you have any insights in and around that?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. And with him heading off to war, I don't know whether he was for or against that, but he was definitely against. After they lost Daniel, he was definitely against, you know, any of our boys going or girls going to war after that. I think he realised that. Hindsight's great though, but he realised what happened after he lost Daniel and what could happen again to our people, and how they weren't regarded as veterans when they returned, and how they didn't get the same types of benefits that other soldiers got. So I guess he would have been so heartbroken to lose a son, like most people would have been. So yeah, I think maybe I'm not sure about him going initially, but definitely not for it later.
Yeah, Sonia, he was very strident again towards the end of his life about Aboriginal people having sacrificed at the end of a bullet. Why should we send any more children overseas to fight for this regime?
He wanted conditions on things. You know, why would you go over there if you're not recognised?
Yep.
Why would you go over there if they're killing our people? You know, so, you know, Uncle William wanted conditions in some ways on going, well, if we go over, we want a few things out of this, which we should rightfully have.
Yeah, and one of those things is that there was a resettlement plan for soldiers when they returned back from battle. Sometimes as late as 1920, they would not get back until having left in 1914 and returning in 1920. And one of those things would be to get a small parcel of land for which people could work and toil and develop a life for themselves. That wasn't afforded to Aboriginal soldiers, which is just one of the greatest disgraces of all time. And just thinking about the trauma of losing his boy over there, in Belgium actually. He didn't actually get his worldly belongings, which were left to Uncle William in Daniel's will, until 1920. So he lost him in 1917. His grief must have been amazingly painful. Gets to 1920, he's going about his daily life, and then one day in the mail, the effects of his boy are returned to him like 3 years later after losing him. The amount of trauma that he, as a man, must have dealt with in his life, and the strength to get through that, I guess for me, is probably his strongest legacy. Do you think?
Oh, definitely. You know, like even the way that he loved and cared for his family through the types of things that he went through, like losing 3 wives, is, you know, plus losing a son, plus losing an infant son, and it's just a whole lot of loss. Then fighting for his people, then watching his mother go through all the things that she went through, seeing all that trauma. quite resilient, like as a man, like, you know.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. And I think we forget what that was like back in those days, because today we have our traumas, but, you know, it would have been absolutely a horrible place.
And you know, a lot of the trauma that exists today, Sonia, is as a result of those traumas. And those trauma lines continue on to today. So he lived in Yarrawonga for a time, and that's where he raised most of his children. And then around about 1930, he decided to move to Melbourne and to move to Footscray. Now, your dad, Uncle Bordy, was actually very fortunate enough to have spent time with Uncle William in Footscray. And like you said, Uncle William took a lot of people in because he didn't want them to either lose their culture or be taken from their families. What are some of the recollections that your dad has of those times, being a young fella around then?
Yeah, I think he felt very fortunate to be able to go and live with his grandparents, and he was really well cared for there with a few of his other cousins were living there at different times. And, you know, one of them was playing football for Carlton, and I think Dad was one of the younger ones during that time. But he does remember, because I asked him about, you know, the meetings that took place in the home, which was the start of the Aboriginal Advancement League and whatnot, and the types of calibre that was going through that door. And his job was to open the door. Yeah. For anyone that came. So he was this little, you know, 6 or 7, 8-year-old opening the door, and he'd let them all in. So, you know, Auntie Marge Tucker was there, and all those types of movers and shakers. And so I guess as a young kid, Dad didn't really understand what was going on. Yeah. His job was to be seen and not heard. So once you open the door, you were to be gone to bed. Other things he remembers was like spending good time with him, quality time, when he would take his soapbox. And his job was to carry his soapbox into the Yarra, where...
it's a pretty adorable vision, isn't it?
It is adorable vision. And he would listen to him talk about the types of things that he was writing in letters during that time in the equal rights for Aboriginal people.
Yeah, and the place where the Australian Aborigines League was founded is still there in Footscray. I forget the name of the street, but Southampton Street. That's it. It's a beautiful little cottage, and it's just amazing to think of all the sort of the giants that were sort of walking in and out of there. What about you, Sonia, through your line? Do you have any sort of direct sort of recollections of the man himself that was passed down to you over time, or have they been lost?
So my nan, Pin-Up, remembers back in the day all of these guys doing what they did. You know, Nanny Jessie Cooper as well. I used to live with Nanny Jessie when I was young. And it was just the same, you know, like when they start talking, you just got to leave the room sort of thing. But they spoke in language and stuff, you know, so they had plans and things like that. So there's just, you know, and Uncle Jimmy Little lived in the same house, you know, as well. So there's like, I like the word giants. Movers and shakers are good, but yeah I like the word giant. Yeah, I guess just the stories continue, you know, because there's been the residents of Cumra have had a high turnover, but the families are still the same, you know. Yeah. But yeah.
And so we're in Footscray in around the 1930s. My great-grandfather, Shadrach James, had been sort of going around and laying the political framework for the League with the view of having Uncle William as its leader always. But it's a very tumultuous time, so it's a time where we're either in depression or we're coming out of depression. There's still the trauma from the war, there's still the trauma from first contact. And so it is decided that through an establishment, we're going to get ourselves organised. And so we established the Australian Aborigines League. which went on to be the rest of Uncle William's life's work. What are some of your reflections on the work of the League and getting to that point where we're actually organised for the first time? What does that mean for us now?
Well, the work that I do with our traditional owner group, carries on a lot of the, it's a rights movement. We still do that, so the political space is even more so now because there's so much going on. And like I said, government behaviour is interesting. Sometimes you think you're dealing with the individual, but you're dealing with the behaviour of government. There's no different to how they were back then to how we are now. I think for me, and the work that I do in the water space, and working on country, means that I have this type of authority now because, Uncle William has done what he's done, and all the way through there's been a whole lot of giants, and I'm pretty lucky to be able to not just, they had to think on the spot, I'm grabbing things from what they've done, so for me it's a lot easier. But the political space is I've heard a lot in this Black and Bright Festival about the colony, and so that plays out, a lot in every aspect of what we do, because we don't own water, we don't own land. Uncle William was asking for land back. People at Cummeragunja are still asking for land back. It ain't going to happen.
No, I think, if you want to try and live a life that's happy in this space, then recognising that's really important.
I think the big thing behind it is, what builds a nation. And so, people memorialise war and they do a range of different things. So you've got, is it banal or banal? Banal forms of nationalism, plays out all the way through. And because of that, it plays out in education and employment. We just can't do what we want all the time. So we're always operating, just like Uncle William, from a resistance position.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
I feel like it's depressing sometimes.
It can be. Yes.
Yeah.
Look, we're running out of time, so I want to touch on a couple of real cornerstone elements of his activism. Right. So let's talk about first. Let's talk about the day of mourning. January 26, 1938, which was the 150th anniversary of the arrival of the First Fleet in Sydney Harbour. He, along with Uncle Jack Patton and Bill Ferguson, and Margaret Tucker, all met in Sydney on that particular day, and they came up with the following motion for the country to embrace. And it read, "We, representing the Aborigines of Australia, assembled in conference at the Australian Hall, Sydney, on the 26th of January 1938, this being the 150th anniversary of the white man's seizure of our country, hereby make protest against the callous treatment of our people by the white man during the past 150 years. And we appeal to the Australian nation of today to make new laws for the education and care of Aborigines. And we ask for a new policy which will raise our people to full citizen status and equality within the white community." Now that's 80-something years ago now. That's quite a remarkable statement from a people that have been so marginalised. I think it's something that we're all proud of, and I would suggest that without statements like this, you wouldn't have the 1967 referendum, and you certainly wouldn't have the Uluru Statement from the heart. So what do you think about all that then, Leonie?
Yeah, definitely. And I think his work is still filtering through who he was. Yeah, we're still catching up. It's like what you're saying, we're still asking for certain things and we're still not being heard. And I know that I've worked in schools for a very long time. So just having a voice to be able to talk about history and truth-telling has been squashed to some degree, like you're saying, still sort of towing the line, still sort of saying you can't say this or you can't do that indirectly. And schools are the place to do it. Schools are key. This is where we're going to, make a difference, and we're still not doing enough of that.
No, we're not. I think From your view, Sonia, do people in the broader community know enough about Uncle William and his contemporaries' work? Because there's a lot to learn from it.
Yeah, I don't think so, because everyone's still operating from a position of fear.
Yeah.
You know, and because they fear things, you know, they're not willing to engage with certain things. Or back in the day, some of the old people said, no, don't talk to them fellas. You know what I mean? So there's still that fear of opening up. We're still asking for the same things that Uncle William and that fought for,
Yep.
and that everybody else around Australia has fought for. It's the same language.
Yeah, it is. And I think, like we said, we're still catching up in a way. But in some ways, it's not actually us that are catching up. It's actually the nation as a whole that still needs to catch up to some of these core concepts.
But they're also quite busy, like the community is focus is diverted on other things.
Yep.
And so that's just taken everything away from, that just seems like it's it'll be even, quadruple the time to get everybody up to speed.
Yep.
Because first of all, do they want to do that? So there's a lot of hate out there, and I feel that they don't know enough. A lot of people don't.
Yeah, I think it would only act to enrich us all if we knew the story as well as some people do. Look, got a couple of minutes before we take some questions from the floor. We could talk about the petition to the King. He petitioned the King. But of course, I think probably the most the famous act that he was responsible for and committed to was the march on the German consulate back in 1938 after Kristallnacht, which was the night that synagogues were burnt down, Jewish businesses were destroyed. With the context that we've been speaking in terms of the trauma that he suffered, the trauma that his mother suffered, the trauma that everyone in that collective would have suffered as a result of colonialisation, the act of actually marching to get better treatment for a dispossessed and persecuted group of people on the other side of the world is something, in my mind, that is still absolutely staggering. And so they marched from their home in Footscray. Now, I have a theory about that because there's a train station not too far away from his home. I reckon one of them couldn't afford the train fare, so they all marched instead of just catching the train there. That must be something for you as a direct descendant, Leonie, something that you're tremendously proud of, and I know that your dad is tremendously proud of as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think, that's the story that a lot of people know about William Cooper. And, he's much more of to him about his own people as well. But, I guess when you hear something like that, it pulls at my heartstrings a little bit in terms of it truly showed me what type of person he was. And the more I find out about him and the things that he's done, I think, he was a good man with a good heart. He looked after his family and during times when, he was marginalised in his own country. So to stand up for another race was a remarkable act. And I think, with regard to the train fares, I know that Dad said that with that, he would put his pension aside, any money he had, so he could fight for his people instead of taking the train. So he quite often would walk to the Yarra. He would walk instead of taking the train.
And he by this time was an old man.
He
was 1938. He lived through till 1941. But he was an old fellow at this time, so the energy that he retained throughout his life must have been amazing. Sonia, what can our mob learn from actions like that one, like the March on the German consulate? What can we learn?
Oh, we can just learn that we don't have to be silent,
Yep.
Like that we matter. And I think that's a huge thing, because having that on my shoulders when I do my work makes me so strong, so I operate from that position. And like Uncle Boydie said that William was well before his time, Uncle William was, and so if you think about that back then, I guess we've got a lot of tools that we can actually grab from all the mob. So for me, it's actually, learning from the past and implementing it for what I do.
And it also helps that we have right on our side, which is something that Uncle William knew more and had a clearer vision of than most people. Look, we've got 8 minutes left, so we're happy to take any questions from the floor if you have any. If not, we'll go back and have that champagne we were talking about earlier on.
Should have had it before.
Yeah, should have had it before. Oh, I wouldn't have been able to shut us up then. Cushion down, yeah.
I think they got.
Where was William Cooper educated? Or how was he educated?
So he was educated on Maloga and Cumbregunja missions. He was also educated through life, I guess, through his experience with the O'Shanasseys down in Melbourne. But most of his formal education in terms of literacy and numeracy would have happened at Maloga and Cumbregunja at the schoolhouse there.
The round table.
Yep, the round table and the scholars' hut.
Yeah.
And during those times, you know, Aboriginal people were not to be educated. Like, there was a law against to grade 2 or 3, and then that was it. So I guess it was very limited for them. So what he learnt during that time was remarkable. And I think you're right. I shared with my cousin earlier about the O'Shanasseys having probably a huge impact on him.
Yeah, that meant that his experience with the O'Shanasseys was a life experience that just wasn't afforded to most Aboriginal people, let alone Aboriginal kids. And so that would have been, I think, a real eye-opener in terms of giving him some street smarts, you know, working out how this mob work, and, you know, street smarts that carry through very much to this day, and the likes of you, Sonia, who are extremely street smart.
Yeah, no. Oh, thanks. No, yeah, we do a lot of work from rights all the way through to, you know, whether we're writing something, whether we fight for something. Yeah, it's a big struggle. Leonie hears about it all the time, you know, like, you know, when we get upset and things like that. But I must say that, you know, the act of Leonie being here today is actually carrying on that legacy of Uncle William. And I'm not sure that she realises that, you know, like that it's an intergenerational thing that she's kept going, and we're really, yeah, we really appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi again.
Oh, hello.
Hello, Jan Bomber.
Hello. So in, say, 5 to 10 years' time, where do you see his legacy? So what do you see as an example, not really a monument, but what sort of grounding, solid thing do you see that we can look back on and, like, reflect as a whole together? I think that's how it was worded in my head, but maybe not.
I think this is a lifelong commitment from family to ensure that his work is, you know, still alive. And obviously things haven't changed. And I think that it's a reminder to us younger, I'm not young, I forgot I wasn't young, is that, you know, we take over the work that our, you know, my dad's 93 and he has just given up this movement, I suppose, and he's done a lot of work, and it's important that people like us are still here talking about William Cooper's work, and also the works of other great leaders during that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
I think, oh, sorry, Sonia.
No, it's well said, yeah.
Yeah. From my perspective, I would like to make his and his contemporaries' names household names, because I think that once people learn the story and understand the story, they'll get it, and then they'll be inspired by it. And I think the great way to change the course of history in this country is through stories. And I can't really think of a more compelling story than his contemporaries and his mother's kiddies. And I think if we can go some way to getting recognition from that, I think that will be a fair way down the road, but it's still a long way to go.
Many thanks to all of you for sharing your insights. I'd just like to know how well William Cooper's legacy has been documented so far, where the gaps are, and whether you can recommend any reading.
Bain Atwood released a history on his life late last year, which is very good. It relies on a lot of the writings that Uncle William penned throughout his life. What we really don't know, though, in vivid detail, is what his life was actually like. We know where he was on such and such a date, but a lot of it is kind of like rumination for us now here through the mists of time. So if we could put some more meat on the story of like what it was like to, you know, move off the mission, what it was like to live in Yarrawonga, what was it like to move from Yarrawonga to the stench of Footscray. All these things we know happen, but we don't really get a great insight into how that affected him and how that affected people. We just know that he must have been extremely strong, extremely resilient, and extremely powerful in the way that he conducted himself.
There are a few other books as well.
Yes, sorry,
Yeah.
there's another one here. Again, sort of co-authored by Bain Atwood with Andrew Marcus, and this is basically called Thinking Black. This is the overdue library copy version that I have. Again, it's got all of the major letters and petitions that he wrote. We don't have many in the way of his personal letters because that's been lost, but everything that he wrote to a paper or wrote to a government authority, because the bureaucracies being what they are, were kept, and so we have access to that. But again, in terms of huge swathes of his life, we don't know what he was thinking or what was driving him on a day-to-day existence.
There's another book called Blood of a Stone, Blood from a Stone as well. That was another book that was written by Bain Atwood and Andrew Marcus. So that details all his letters and everything else again. So, you know, a lot of the history was oral, and that's how Aboriginal people kept their connection to history, through orally speaking about it. They were excluded from mainstream society, so that history was kept to themselves within their family and communities. So nothing was ever really documented as such, like a Western
like a
documentation.
like a letter
Yeah.
from Uncle William
Yeah.
to Ada,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
or you know, we don't have that sort of correspondence.
Yeah.
Sorry for hogging the mic.
No,
William Cooper was honoured in Israel by the planting of 5 trees in the Forest of the Martyrs. Why hasn't there been anything done for him in Australia?
Good question.
Well, yeah, there is a monument in Shepparton to Uncle William in the Queen's Garden. It's named the Queen's Garden. And from that, you can also view Dan Cooper on the wall. So he stands very tall on the wall. So he's honoured there in this sort of movement in Shepparton. That's as much as I know.
and we have the federal seat of Batman that was changed to Cooper, which was a beautiful irony and a really useful way to pay tribute to him being the political animal that he was.
And no one even recognises Uncle William's son, Lynch Cooper, who was the Australian world champion in 1929, won the Stall Gift, 28. He was just like Usain Bolt, you know, like fast as ever, but no one cares, you know. And it's not about no one cares, it's about they purposely designed it that way to not care. It's as simple as that.
Well, we care, and the fact that you're here today shows that you care as well. So thank you all very much for coming along. Thank you so much to Leonie and Sonia. It's been fun. We could talk all day about this sort of stuff. But time's up, so thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay.